Weatherization Assistance Program. And the CSBG funds pass from the federal government through the state government to local community action agencies. And then these agencies form an association called the California-Nevada Community Action Network, CalNEVA, which includes government and nonprofit organizations. And in accordance with federal law, the state must submit a community service block grant state plan and hold an annual legislative hearing to oversee the grant. The purpose of the CSBG state plan is to provide certification and assurance that the state will meet fiscal, programmatic, and public hearing requirements as set forth by Congress, and to describe how CSBG programs operate within the state. And our challenge today is to examine the proposed plan. And we look forward to hearing from our witnesses, Mr. John Wagner, the Director of the Department of Community Services and Development, and Mr. Tim Reese, the Executive Director of CalNEVA. So with that, Assemblymember Bell, would you have any opening remarks?
Yeah, just without being repetitive, I wanted to welcome everybody here today, especially John Wagner, who's done a great job for the state of California, and Tim Reese, the CalNEVA Community Action Network. And thank you both for all your service to our state, and we really appreciate it. It's really unfortunate that we're here to review a state plan that had a 50% reduction in the state's federal allocation that could be a potential reduction. So that's one thing perhaps that we ought to recognize right up front, that this is a possibility. And even the $60 million doesn't really go that far when considering the broad priorities of our community services block grant program that we have in California for our low-income Californians. And that we have to stretch our dollars, so we're going to do the best we can. On top of that, we all know too well that there's been massive cuts in other human services and social services programs due to our budget restraints that we've had in terms of adopting a budget that's balanced and having to make cuts in our budget. I hope that we deal with this 50% decrease and have some creative thoughts on how and when and in which way the state is adjusting its priorities for anticipation of such a big cut. Like, what are we going to do? What's our plan? And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I hope also that each of you can offer thoughts and suggestions how our community services block grant program can be modified following the federal requirements to stretch the dollars further by improving efficiencies, increasing coordination and collaboration among participating agencies, so that our limited dollars can be used even more effectively. So, and I'm also interested in hearing from our agencies out in the communities about what they have to say about our program in the public and giving you feedback on our plan. So any suggestions you have to make our program more efficient and effective. So thank you for being here, and I appreciate the testimony of everybody involved in this program.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bell. Welcome to Senator Emerson. Would you have any opening remarks?
No, let's jump right into it.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Wagner, we'd love to have you talk about the plan.
Great, and thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. I want to again, thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk about and provide an overview of the Community Services Block Grant, or CSBG. And with me is Pamela Harrison, who is the Community Services Division Manager for the state, the CSD, who will help in answering especially the tough questions that you might have about our state plan. The goal of all the programs administered by the department is to provide low-income individuals and families a pathway out of poverty into self-reliance and improved well-being. CSD achieves this goal through not only providing some of the most basic services and immediate life necessities, but through also providing services that help individuals and families achieve self-sufficiency. As required by federal law, The CSBG state plan contains several programmatic assurances the state of California must adhere to. In addition, in accordance with guidance from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the state plan describes how the CSBG program operates within California to reflect locally determined programmatic priorities established through community action planning, needs assessment, and public forums at the local level. CSD, as you mentioned, Madam Chair, distributes federal funds through our 59 eligible local private, nonprofit, and public agencies, which cover all of California's 58 counties throughout the state and fall into one of the following categories: community action agencies, migrant and seasonal farm workers associations, limited purpose agencies, and Native American Indian agencies. The CSBG program provides a broad range of services and activities to help reduce poverty in California's communities, including assistance in the areas of food distribution and nutrition, job training, employment, education, and income management, housing, emergency services, and other programs that assist low-income families that you'll hear about throughout the course of today's hearing. Just for your reference, in the draft plan that you have on page 34, Table F, really breaks down the expenditures for the 2010 CSBG plan. 2010 is the last year for which a full year's data are available, and you'll see how the spending breaks into the categories that I just mentioned, including others. One of the unique and important characteristics or elements of CSBG that I think we need to highlight is that it really can assist local communities in revitalization of low-income areas and assist them in the reduction of poverty, and helps local service providers build capacity and develop links with other service providers through something called leveraging, which you'll hear about. In fact, during 2010, California's local CSBG eligible entities leveraged just over $1.7 billion in other federal funding through federal programs, state programs, local public funding, private, and other resources. So this positive effect recycles money back into the economy, resulting in a much larger benefit and impact to our local communities than just the CSBG funding stream alone. Last year, California reported serving over 3.5 million low-income Californians through our network of CSBG-eligible entities. Since 2001, the Federal CSBG Act requires that states participate in something called Results-Oriented Management and Accountability Systems, or ROMA systems, or another federally approved performance system. All states must annually prepare and submit to federal HHS a report on the measured performance of the state and eligible entities throughout the state. This framework led to the creation of 6 national goals and 16 national performance indicators that are also part of the state plan. The state plan lists the national goals and indicators on page 26 and 27. And just to highlight one, for example, the first goal, entitled Low-Income People Becoming More Self-Sufficient, the number of participants in community action programs who get a job or become self-employed is one of the indicators under that goal. For 2010, California reported that 46 separate community action agencies enrolled 44,055 unemployed persons, and of these, 23,842 obtained a job. Similarly, 32 community action agencies enrolled 12,629 employed persons, and of these, 9,861 obtained an increase in employment income or an increase in employment benefits. CSD also encourages innovative community and neighborhood-based initiatives that are developed through the community action planning process, which in many cases includes local partnerships and the leveraging that I mentioned earlier. The state plan before you includes description of a few of the innovative projects and programs administered throughout the state, but just to highlight a couple to give a sense of what is going on at the local level. One example includes the day labor centers provided by California Human Development, a migrant and seasonal farm worker agency that provides services across California. CHD operates these as one-stop centers that connect job seekers with employers, as well as provide an array of services in one location, including everything ranging from emergency food, rental assistance, parenting training, and as a gateway to training funded through other resources, including the Workforce Investment Act, or WIA funding. CHD partners with more than 20 local organizations to provide these services, including the county, the Workforce Investment Board, faith-based organizations, and other nonprofits throughout the area. The City of LA is a public agency that operates something called All Family Source Centers, which provide opportunities to local, neighborhood-based groups and organizations to offer classes and meetings to address specific needs throughout their community. For example, the East Los Angeles Family Source Center provides space for something called the Girls Today, Women Tomorrow Mentoring Project, which matches young girls with successful women to encourage educational success and attainment. And the last example, just to highlight the positive impact made by CSBG funding, is an innovative program provided by the private nonprofit Community Action Board of Santa Cruz, known as GEMA. After conducting a survey in their community's needs, Santa Cruz implemented this program committed to helping women transition back into the community after incarceration. GEMA is structured to provide transitional housing and wraparound support services to promote recovery from addictions and empower women to transform their lives. In order to accomplish these goals, the agency provides housing, food, employment programs, as well as psychological support to help stop the cycle of incarceration and recidivism. This community action agency has 32 partners to provide this program, including county, sheriff and probation departments, local adult educational systems, and faith-based organizations, amongst others. And I know there are some directors here today who will talk a lot more about some of the local programs they've been creative and innovatively pieced together in their communities that will provide additional examples of their amazing work utilizing CSBG to address the needs of low-income individuals and families in their communities. In addition to the local examples that I've highlighted and that you'll hear a little bit more about, we at the state at CSD also work at the state level to coordinate programs that improve the quality of life for low-income Californians. A recent example of this is something that I know the chair has championed well, and that is the targeted program to increase access to something called the Earned Income Tax Credit, or EITC, among low-income households. And this was specifically done under the CSBG Recovery Act funding that we received. We were able to target just under 1%, or roughly $900,000, that went to 21 local agencies throughout the state, which resulted in over 28,000 low-income participants claiming more than $15 million in EITC benefits or refunds. And much of that money, obviously, was infused back into these local economies. On top of the targeted program under the Recovery Act, nearly 40,000 low-income Californians participated in tax preparation programs offered by CSBG eligible entities in 2010, who in aggregate claimed over $46 million in any type of federal or state tax credits. And because of these collaborative efforts that are so critical in meeting the needs of those whom we serve, just this past June, CSD began contracting with the state association, the California-Nevada Community Action Partnership, or CalNEVA, to provide training and technical assistance to CSBG providers. A component of this will be accomplished through the development of an EITC resource bank that will help expand efforts to increase EITC filings among California's low-income population. And I think the resource bank will provide resources such as a pool of trainers to assist organizations implement new EITC programs, support materials for outreach and marketing to increase awareness of the benefit of the program, training webinars, and other tools to help increase EITC tax filings in California. Lastly, to address some of the comments that Chairman Bell had made regarding CSBG going forward, these for sure are very uncertain times. The Obama administration is proposing a 50% reduction to CSBG and proposing additional programmatic changes as well. The reduction is projected for the 2012 federal fiscal year beginning this October 2011. If the reduction occurs, California's allocation for 2012 would be about $30 million, a reduction from the 2011 allocation of roughly $60 million, and will result in a restructuring of the current services delivery system. We have not received any further information or guidance on what this could look like from our federal partners, and the funding for 2012 is still being debated at the national level and is pending in Congress. Because we do not have the final CSBG appropriation figure, the state plan provides two funding allocation formulas, one based on the 2011 funding level and one that would represent this 50% reduction should that occur and be passed along to the states. But in anticipation for that reduction, CSD has taken a proactive approach, and we have partnered with our friends at CalNEVA in developing a CSBG advisory task force consisting of network representatives to solicit input and make recommendations regarding possible state formula modifications to implement the proposed funding reductions. And this would include other programmatic changes as well. The reflected allocations listed in the state plan will obviously change dependent upon the final federal budget allocation, any additional changes made by Congress, and the funding formula recommendations that we are looking for to come out of the CSBG Advisory Task Force. As many important federally funded programs are being looked at this time of economic uncertainty, we will face challenges ahead that will require innovation and collaboration, making the productive relationships between the local, the state, and the federal levels all as critical as ever to deliver these valuable programs and services to low-income families and individuals. But history has shown that community action and the Community Action Network is incredibly adaptable, which is only further proven by the successful leveraging and many strategic partnerships that take place each year to better serve the low-income community. As you see and can see from this brief overview, the CSBG grant is very unique in providing community-based organizations with invaluable resources to meet the highest needs within their communities determined locally at any given time, and any reduction in this funding will have a significant impact. But I believe that with many of the items identified in my remarks, we will ensure that California continues to have the strong leadership and partnerships, the critical partnerships that will better set us up to weather the challenges that lay before us. So again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and provide this overview of the 2012-13 state plan and application. And I sincerely appreciate your ongoing support for the CSBG program here in California. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, before we proceed with questions, I want to welcome Assemblymember Jones and Assemblymember Ammiano to the committee. And with that, are there any questions do you have for Mr. Wagner? No? Yes. Well,
Go ahead.
Mr. Bell or Mr. Emerson? Senator Emerson.
Mr. Wagner, what happens if the federal support goes below the 50% level that you're predicting? What do we do then?
Well, what would occur is we have undertaken the planning process, which you see in the state plan. So basically, the instructions from federal HHS were to look at that potential 50% reduction and what that would mean for the state of California. Because that was not a final decision, and as I mentioned, Congress and the President have proposed different changes to the program as well, including how potentially the funds would be allocated. We are putting together this task force, and this task force is really charged, and CalNEVA has been very helpful partners in putting this together, charged with bringing together representatives across the network to make recommendations on how best to absorb such a change to the program, whether that be the 50% reduction or a different administration of how funds are given out of Washington. In addition to looking at recommendations for how to make the program more administratively efficient, so that if there are federal changes that we would want to advance or recommend, or state changes that we'd want to advance or recommend, that those recommendations would come out. The other thing I would say is that under state law, there is a provision where federal funding, if it's reduced, it impacts the way in which discretionary dollars are allocated. Discretionary dollars are the 5% of the block grant that we currently have called discretionary, just over $3 million. And that state statute could trigger as well and come into play how funds would be allocated. So, for example, last year there was a 2.7% reduction, I think it was, and that was backfilled with some of those discretionary funds. So all of these pieces are kind of interwoven. But if there was a cut of that magnitude, we would really look to that advisory force to weigh in on some recommendations.
Yeah, just to follow up then, you're not looking at a general fund backfill on that at all?
This is not, it is not general fund reliant in any way.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bell?
I think it's very good that we prepare for some kind of cutback, because if it doesn't happen this year, it'll happen maybe over time. It might take a couple years before we get hit with a cutback, but I think in preparation for that, I think we have to look at, like I say, the outcome measures. That should be part in play in terms of looking at which programs are performing effectively, which ones haven't met the goals. And I think when you have less money, I think that's the kind of thing you have to do, especially in this case. And I was going to ask the question essentially, what are your plans for doing that, to look more closely at outcome measures? And then the second question, so I can just get them out here. You mentioned that we might have to make administrative practices or statute legislative ideas. Are you anticipating coming to the legislature with ideas that might mean that we should change our statutes that we need to consider in this program to make it more effective and more efficient?
So to answer the question, I'll ask Deputy Pam Harrison to join in and fill out what I don't cover. But to get to your questions, I think we would envision that if there was a significant reduction in the federal resources, that there would have to be some changes in how the program is administered. To use an example, there are some federal requirements that require us to go out and do program monitoring and visits, federal reporting. And we're still doing this analysis because the allocations have not come out of Washington, but depending on where those resources are, it really limits our ability to manage and oversee and tie together these programs at the state level. I think your point about program performance and indicators is critical. And one of the things that is being discussed, I didn't get into it in depth in my testimony, but one of the things being discussed at the federal level is to what degree some of these funds would be allocated through a competitive process. But those decisions have not been made. But I think the work done since the early part of the decade, where Roma and the performance goals and the indicators under each one of those goals have been tracked, and as agencies have started to implement this, will be critical in identifying the successful indicators and where performance is, so that those kinds of decisions hopefully can be made.
You're constrained by the allocation process, where you have to do every 58 counties gets an allocation. So if you cut the money in half, then some of the smaller counties are going to get like a way smaller piece of the pie. But you still have to administer that grant, even though it's half the money. Is there ways we can create efficiencies in administration by maybe asking some of the smaller counties to combine their grant applications?
Yeah.
That would be one idea.
Do a regional
to create
approach.
a consortium concept like we've done in other programs.
And I think that is definitely something being discussed. Our funding doesn't necessarily go to the counties as it does what are called eligible entities, including community action agencies, which are in federal statute. But to use an example, LPAs, the limited partner agencies, also are required to be funded, and those funds come out of our 5% discretionary dollars. So to the degree, all of these things are established in federal statute. To the degree that such a reduction occurs, I think all of those things would have to be looked at. And we would need some of the relief at the federal. These aren't just state decisions; those are federal requirements that the program currently has.
Yeah. You have to go to them. They require state statute law changes, correct?
I think the state reflects the federal statutes.
Okay.
All these things are in federal statute.
We have to ask them for a waiver or some kind of. And then, what about state statute changes? Is it anticipated that we might have to adjust some of those?
I would think so, because the way they're proposing the program to be reformatted, in discussion with my OCS Region 9 rep, it's anticipated there would have to be some enabling legislation to accompany the change. Because currently, as John indicated, how the programs are administered, the funding of the agencies, that is all in state statute. And so when the enabling legislation accompanies if there is a proposed reduction, then in turn, yes, the state statute would actually have to also be changed to correspond with the federal.
Okay. Welcome, Senator Wright. Any other questions for anybody? I was just curious. I know that the grantees had to submit their 2-year plans at the end of June, and you're probably in the process of evaluating them. And can you tell us a little bit about how you determine best practices, what programs go forward, something about the process, and how you select who's doing a good job, and or how do you correct deficiencies in programs?
Actually, the Community Action Plan is based on local self-determination. Mm-hmm. So it's actually incumbent upon the agencies. What they do is they conduct a community needs assessment. They hold public hearings. They have to analyze and assess the poverty within their area, because the poverty in LA County would be very different than IMACA. And within that, it's incumbent on them to actually address the issues of poverty. There's specific requirements in the Community Action Plan of how they're filling in the gaps. If there's an area that's not being met, then how is it being met? Our agencies are very proactive, and their linkages and partnerships that they establish is phenomenal in helping them to carry out their programs. Additionally, in the Community Action Plan, there is a component where they're supposed to plan on if there is a reduced funding, federal funding, and also the impact. And so this year, in reviewing the plans, making sure the agencies actually have a more proactive approach to how they're going to respond to that. It has been in the Community Action Plan for a number of years, and this year it's not routine, because we're going into a new era. And so, but the agencies have actually, in anticipation of it, they are actually at the local level looking internally on those decisions now. They're moving forward. Some agencies are consolidating programs, so they actually are planning for the cut and looking at those programs that may not be as cost-effective or as high-performing.
Right.
But it's local self-determination.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other comment? I just wanted to note that the Bureau of State Audit's report on CSD about your weatherization program, and it stated that you're moderately prepared to administer the Recovery Act weatherization. How do you respond to that? We're going to get on target?
Well, I'd be happy to jump in because this is not on the CSBG side, so Pam's off the hook, but I'm happy to respond to that. We did first of all, I'd like to say that the BSA audit and the review of our preparedness of the department has been going on now for a couple of years. And when I first came to the department, they were close to issuing a letter, which was issued, I think, in early July. And I think as typical, the BSA identify areas of concern that are really helpful for us as public managers to focus on and look at those areas of concern. At the time they did their analysis, the data went through, I think, the end of April, and we have subsequently had a couple months of more actual data. They estimated roughly $37 million potentially at risk that would not be spent in California. I think based on the newest data, it's closer to maybe $22 million, which is what we provided to the Senate Energy and Utilities Committee when they had a hearing on this issue. We continue to work very aggressively with our partners. One of the things we're engaged in right now with our associations and others is to look at actual production by the 39 energy providers. Who's on target? Where are their goals over the course of the next month? Who is falling short of those goals? And the August actuals will be really instrumental in making those determinations as to whether or not we should begin to move funding around to those providers who are best equipped and have proven they're meeting their monthly goals in production and rates of production. And so we are, in the process of doing that survey, wrapping that survey up, looking at August actuals, which will be known to us probably the first week of September. We are doing everything we can, Senator, to make sure that every penny available to California comes to California. The other thing I should note is the Brown administration has taken on a very leadership role in working with the federal partners at the Department of Energy to request an extension. When ARA was first rolled out, it took our federal partners, understandably, this was complicated and new business, about 9 months to come out with federal guidance on prevailing wages and Davis-Bacon. And so that was a significant delay in startup time. And I think if we were to get an extension even to the degree of 6 to 9 months or a year, which is what we asked for, our providers would not be looking at reverting any funds and would be able to fully expend them here in California. So we do have that request into our federal partners.
Okay. Otherwise, it's a March 2012 deadline or something like that.
They expire the end of March 2012. Exactly.
2012, right.
Yep.
Okay. All right. With that, let's proceed with Mr. Reese. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Chair Liu and Chair Bell, and members of the committee. I'm Tim Reese, Executive Director of the California-Nevada Community Action Partnership. We're the state association for community action agencies and other CSBG-eligible entities in California. And as is mentioned, our 56 members provide services to over 3 million low-income Californians. This includes community action agencies, migrant seasonal farm worker organizations, limited purpose agencies, and Native American Indian providers. The role of the state association is defined by the federal statute, and our role in partnership with the state office and working with the federal office is to increase the capacity of local CSBG eligible entities, agencies in your communities on the ground, to improve their outcomes and quality of service to low-income Californians. We are also to assist them in carrying out the mandates of the CSBG Act and to assist them in measuring and communicating the results of those activities that are federally funded. I particularly want to thank and acknowledge CSD, Pamela Harrison, manager of CSBG department, and John Wagner as the new interim director. Their style of openness, transparency, partnership building, relationship building is very positive and very constructive. We're very pleased with his interim appointment. I'd love for it to be permanent, but that's a personal comment. They have invited the network to provide input to the state plan, review the state plan. We've been given ample opportunity to criticize the state plan and to provide direct input into that plan. Not only has the department listened to input from the network, positive and constructive, they have integrated those ideas and concepts and comments into the state plan. This is very important because our working relationship with the department is designed by the federal government as a tripartite solution. It brings together the federal government, the state government, and the state association to work together in partnerships, networking, and coordinating to maximize outcomes and leveraging of resources that then go through supports to the local agencies within your jurisdictions to help low-income families in your communities. This tripart solution works well because it's based on partnerships and working together for common solutions. This also works well at the local level because it brings local resources to solve local problems through local solutions. And your community knows best what the needs are in your community. We are here to just assist them in fulfilling the promise of community action. We also work with other networks and groups in the state of California to benefit constituents in your jurisdictions. For example, with support from Senator Liu's office and many others, CalNEVA has taken the lead in establishing the EITC Asset Building Collaborative. This collaborative includes others outside the network that we may not normally have relationships with, such as Catholic Charities, New America Foundation, Federal Reserve Bank, City of Los Angeles, etc. We have over 100 participants from other organizations throughout the state supporting CalNEVA's lead and efforts in building this collaborative. As a result of our networking and partnership relationships with the state, federal office, and EITC providers throughout the state, CalNEVA has been selected to be the lead in a new federal process of funding state associations through the Regional Performance and Innovation Consortia. And Member Bell, you mentioned a consortia. CalNEVA in California will be coordinating these training and technical assistance services for the states of California, Arizona, Nevada, Hawaii, and Guam. I'm very proud of this. We also will be implementing an exemplary practice project in Region 9 around EITC asset development collaboration. We look forward to the successful implementation of this plan. We know it is a challenge given the prospect of a 50% reduction or other changes. We are confident that CalNEVA, supporting the state office, with our CSBG advisory task force, representatives from the entire network, we can resolve these issues and come up with best case scenarios given the limitations and restraints. CalNEVA urges your approval of the state plan, and we are committed to ensuring its success in the years ahead. And our board president, Derek Simpson, when you open for public testimony and comment, will share with you the value of CSBG at the local level within one of your jurisdictions.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions or comments? Mr. Amiano.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. When you're talking about, the community knowing best, and that's the direction you want to take. There's a large LGBT community in San Francisco, and I do note in transgender issues, the data shows many are very much at the lower end of the economic scale. But I noticed and I don't know if this is going to be a problem or if there's a way to work with it, to ensure that no person shall, on the basis of race, color, national origin, or sex, but it doesn't say sexual orientation. And also there's 19 consider religious organizations on the same basis as other non-governmental organizations, but that might come up with some tenet of a religious organization that's not compatible with the LGBT. So have you dealt with this before, and are you prepared to deal with it again?
Well, the state association certainly will do what we can to assure that all federal and state requirements are met by the organizations. I'm not personally aware of any situation or issue of concern from the LGBT community, but I assure you that we would certainly look into that if it were brought to our attention.
Okay, well, I think perhaps there's a good chance. And then in terms of the language of the non-discrimination clause, I don't know if there's a conflict between state non-discrimination and federal around this issue. Oftentimes there has been. But it is an area of sensitivity that I would very much like to pursue. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater by any means, but it is something that I feel incumbent to address.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Wright.
We'll go back to the auditor's report, and the chair raised a question. Are we making the changes that the auditor recommended? Did the auditor not take into account the realities of initiating the program? Where are we with respect to?
Well, I think the auditor didn't. The purpose of the audit, the letter, it wasn't a full report, was to kind of forecast: are we on track based on the current production rate and production, meaning the cost of units and the number of units that our providers were weatherizing. And so the math on that basically showed that at the current rate, which they did through the end of April, that we were at risk of not being able to fully expend the 185. They didn't address the startup issue I mentioned about the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage delay, and they didn't address the request for an extension, which this administration has sought from the Department of Energy, because it came out just after their analysis, but before their letter was released. So it wasn't something they could have reacted to, and I'm not even sure that was the purpose of their audit. But having said that, I think we in the department have been working with the 39 providers that I mentioned where we're doing this survey. The benefit of that, Senator, has been it's also highlighted certain barriers to DOE policies that are preventing our 39 providers from getting achieving their full goals in the number of units they are weatherizing. And we've started to escalate these issues to the Department of Energy. 2 weeks ago, they were out here. Some of those barriers have been addressed, but California continues to press for the resolution of additional barriers we've identified to give California more flexibility to bring these units online. And all of those efforts, the survey, the request for an extension, the ongoing negotiation over these barriers, are part of the state's strategy to maximize the ARA resources that are available to California.
Okay, let me try this again.
Mm-hmm.
The auditor suggests that at the present rate of usage that you won't be able to spend the money. Okay, if we get a waiver, then we extend the time, which doesn't change the auditor's finding. It just simply says we have allotted more time to spend the same amount of money before we lose it. Are we yet achieving anything that will increase the rate of consumption? Assuming, for example, that, okay, you are aware of the Davis-Bacon issue. Assuming that the Davis-Bacon issue is resolved. Assuming that the other startup issues are resolved. Are we now at a point where the rate of consumption has increased?
The rate of consumption or the rate of production that our providers are achieving has increased. But again, if we get the response from the Department of Energy that we are seeking on some of these barriers, the production will go up even higher.
What's a barrier?
For example, there are requirements that the federal government has on how our providers can weatherize multi-unit dwellings or MUD units. And there are specific auditing requirements, and many very delineated requirements by the Federal Department of Energy. And some of our providers, San Francisco for one, we're dealing very closely with the city of San Francisco, Los Angeles, have identified that some of the federal requirements are preventing them from weatherizing as many units as they otherwise could. They have to go through a very complicated calculation to come up with an investment ratio of the cost for each unit in the dwelling. Of the multifamily dwelling. So we've been working with the providers to give some flexibility of how that calculation is done so that they can move in and weatherize more units. But all of those discussions are going on between us and the Department of Energy. And like I said, they've acknowledged, and granted us some of what we've been asking for, but we still continue to work on some of those barriers. The one thing I would say, if we get the extension, it's not that have longer time to leave money in Washington. We feel we can fully expend the money California has with that extension. So there would be no money left in Washington if we got the extension.
But the extension, so the rate of production is at some point going to increase. I mean, you're seeking a modification on the formulation for what you have to do to qualify. I mean, it would seem to me that the startup things having been behind you, that we should be able to increase production going forward. If we're going to, if all those things that you do, you still are at the same production level. I mean, maybe it is that a discussion might be that the amount of money that you received versus the requirements to comply, maybe it is you can't spend it all. I mean, because there's a point at which I guess you could waste money. I'll take a few million if you're gonna just.
No, that's redevelopment.
And that may be, but what I hope doesn't happen is that the auditor's report comes back, and then the suggestion becomes that the department failed. I would rather, if it is, for example, that the federal department designed a program that the requirements of it, coupled with Davis-Bacon, couples with whatever barriers, if it is that's not a realistic goal, sometimes it's better that you don't spend all the money. Mm-hmm. And you say, we spend as much of it as we could efficiently. Just because you have it doesn't mean you have to spend it. But what I don't want to have is a discussion about the failure of the department to actually do its job. I'd rather say we did as good a job as we could with the money and the time that we had. And if you state that at the outset, then that's not a failure. It becomes a failure if the money goes back and then we're having this hearing post facto trying to figure out why who screwed up and why we didn't get it. I'd rather say right now, we're only going to spend this much of the money because that's all the time we have, and the crews that we can do, the federal requirements to comply are such that I'd rather us be kind of prospective as opposed to sitting around and everybody throwing rocks at you because they're saying you sent money back. And I can assure you there's some pretty accurate rock throwers around here. There are not many people who could work on the front end to get it done, but there are a whole lot of people who could throw rocks at you after the fact. So I'd hate to see you in that spot because, it's ugly when they start throwing rocks at people. I've seen that before. You don't want to be that guy.
Okay, I just, let me just make a little comment here, Senator Wright. On that state auditor's report dated July 11th, there is a justification from the department as to different protocols being used, and that's being evaluated with the DOE. There's also the cost of weatherization is now determined to be more expensive than originally thought to be, along with the protocols. And no one anticipated, and I hear this from LA County, because they're also going through this process with weatherization using the IOU money, about establishing infrastructure so that they're prepared to get out and do the jobs. I mean, there needs to be training that hasn't been done before for this new technologies, the green technologies that have come online, et cetera. So there's this whole series of things, and I would say that everybody's trying to do their best they can, except that sometimes we always trip. Government trips over our feet because we just don't want to get into trouble. Being careful about spending money. But I understand that and hope, as we all do, that the numbers will be increasing and that we'll get the job done. We'll spend the $22 million. That's kind of the bottom line. Are there any other questions? I also wanted to welcome Assemblymember Portantino and Senator Hancock to the meeting, too. Any other questions, members? Well, then it's time for public comments. I really appreciate you're coming before us, educating us on our state plan. And thank you very much, and wish you great luck. And so maybe we can hear from the folks in the audience who have signed up, if they have any comment on the state plan. Oh, just one. Great. Mr. Simpson, please come forward. You were part of the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. Welcome. Thank you very much. And on a personal note, thank you for helping my office out.
My pleasure. Good afternoon. My name is Derek Simpson. I'm the Executive Director of the Long Beach Community Action Partnership. I had the pleasure of serving both in Senator Lieu and Senator Wright's areas in terms of our energy programs. But I'm here to speak with basically two hats. One and first and foremost, the Executive Director of Long Beach Community Action Partnership. Secondly, as President of the Board of CalNEVA, of which Tim Reese just spoke. So I have the honor of being elected into that position by my colleagues around the state as of April of this year, and have served in that capacity since then. My objective in the short time that I have here before you is to talk about things from a local level, sort of where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, in many of these examples that have been spoken of. Senator Wright, I have good peripheral vision, so I'm looking for the rocks from my left and my right, and I'll be ready as they come forward, as you've been talking.
He doesn't have good aim, so you're
Not from what he's been saying. My objective really is then to speak to you in all seriousness about the fact that in Long Beach, we're a city that has one of the greatest number of residents in poverty in the state of California. And in fact, about 25% of our youth are in poverty. When I took over this agency 5 years ago, my objective was to not duplicate what is already being done very well in the city. In the last 2 years, for instance, to give you an example of what CSBG dollars are doing, we as an agency received $971,000. That's small in comparison to some. That's large in comparison to others. But the fact of the matter is, what we've done is, as many of you use the word leverage, is leverage those dollars. When I took over 5 years ago, we were a $1.4 million agency. Today, we're a $12 million agency. And we've done that by, first of all, building the credibility among our peers and our colleagues and our customers in the city of Long Beach, to let them know that though they're in poverty and though they're facing some of the greatest struggles, we're here to help them by providing the best. And we, as an agency, as my colleagues around the state do, have done a good job of identifying what it is that we do well and focusing in that particular area, and then empowering our partners in the communities that we serve to step up and do what they do well as a complement to the services that provide. We, in 2010, for instance, provided 1,988 youth and adults with employment-related services. In fact, the Pacific Gateway Workforce Investment Network has gotten to the point now where, because they have so many people coming to them for job assistance, that they refer people to our agency because we've partnered with Goodwill to provide job development services, because many of the people can't get the one-on-one services at the local WIB. And so that's another example of how dollars are being leveraged to work with other dollars that are both state and federal at the local level. And because of CSBG, we can make things like that happen. We provided 11 11,000 citizens in 2010 with safety net services, everything from rental assistance to tax preparation, has been mentioned earlier, and we've worked with your office, Senator Lewin, trying to do a better job of earned income tax credit assistance. We've helped 138 youth with digital media arts internships. That's important to us because when you talk about the fact that CSBG may go away for me, it may be almost $500,000 that all of a sudden now I have to look at how do I replace that. In this economy, you can't just go out and find that. We are fortunate that proactively we've always looked at the glass half full. We are believers that we have to look at ways to gather earned income as well as other grants. We have to supplement those things that are successful, look at eliminating things that aren't. The sad part about the fact is that we have begun to leverage our dollars by giving monies, for instance, to Cal State University Long Beach. Rather than my staff teaching a particular class, the university comes in, teaches for free low-income people who are trying to get retrained in things like QuickBooks and social media skills, how to do those particular jobs, and they get a CSUOB certificate of completion rather than a Long Beach Community Action Partnership certificate of completion. It carries weight with their resume when they go to get a job. We've also partnered with Legal Aid to expunge records so people can get apartments, that they can get jobs that ordinarily they wouldn't have been able to get. In your district, Senator Lieu, from an energy perspective, we've helped 84 households to the tune of $26,000 since September of last year. In yours, Senator Wright, 1,169 households to the tune of $346. Totally, we've assisted over 14,500 households since last September for $4.3 million on the energy side of the house. All of this is at the base of all of this is our CSBG funds, because it helps us as an agency do the things that we do. We've leveraged contracts with the Long Beach Unified School District to provide after-school services to 1,000 students who come to the schools. Our teens just performed at the Grammy Museum last week as a result of our digital media arts program, and have other projects coming up. And we're being considered by the Knight Foundation as one of the communities that will receive a special grant to provide public access television in the city of Long Beach. These are all diversified ways that we're trying to not just say, oh my gosh, we're losing the money, but look at, how can we continue to do the good work. The sad part is that we've started such great momentum in our community and communities around the state. CSBG going away will severely hamper that. I think it will only hamper, it won't kill what the movement is all about. Ideally, yes, we would like to keep it, we would like to see it grow. But all of us as executive directors and CEOs understand that as business people, we have to operate our agencies as businesses. We have to look at where we can increase efficiencies, as you stated up here earlier, and how we can do a better job of serving the community. I don't know that my time, see a red light flashing or anything, but in essence, those were the key things that I wanted to speak to. This year, those numbers that I just mentioned continue to increase, and I dare answer any questions that you might ask.
Thank you very much for joining us. Are there any questions you have for, yes?
You're the ones that actually provide the service, so I wanted to ask you this question. How do we change the laws here in Sacramento to make this service delivery faster, better? I mean, the audit, for example, shows that we're not drawing down the money fast enough for some kind of, there's whatever the reason is. I always say, I don't really care what the reason is. Something's causing, there's a lot of reasons probably. We're not spending the money fast enough, okay? Then it also says, in some cases, we're spending too much money on a single home. That's the other thing it says. So how do you solve those problems? What is the way we can solve those kind of problems? And then in terms of the CSBG program, how do we get more bang from our buck here in terms of legislation, administrative practices to improve it and improve your ability to deliver services? We need to kind of think like this, because I could see a lot of cutbacks coming. We're regardless of what we're going to do, and the safety net's in trouble. We have to start. We have to do something. So you're the ones that work on this. You can tell us, give us some answers. So what would your suggestions be?
Wow. My suggestions, first and foremost, would be in terms of changing the laws, or what can you do at this level. I think one of the biggest steps that you could have made on our behalf as a network was putting Mr. Wagner in the position that he's in. And I say that not because he's behind me.
So you need like a good administrator.
But because, in all seriousness, ladies and gentlemen, the fact of the matter is this has to be a partnership, right? I mean, business is all about relationships. And if you have a relationship of trust with the people who you're in the trenches with, that you can understand that not every step that you make is going to be analyzed for how you fail, but looking at how you can improve, then that enables agencies to take risks that are prudent, not to waste money or to jeopardize the mission, but to expand the boundaries. As was stated earlier, this has been in existence, CSBG, since Lyndon Johnson. I mean, that's a long time. It's various reiterations. We have to keep reinventing ourselves. So with, for instance, persons like Mr. Wagner and Pamela Harrison in place, they are the staff that have been at least open to such ideas and not saying, no, this is rigidly how we have to do it, but within the context of the law and within the spirit of the law, how can we make the right things happen in the various communities that we serve? So I think having the staff at the state level partner with the agencies and understand what the real issues are, because it's one thing to write this glorious plan. It's another thing when you get on the streets and you have to deal with, the various personalities and the various nuances that are unique to that particular agency or that particular city. I tell people, my experience has been it's like a big bubble in a pipe. And until you get to that point in the pipe, do you know what to expect? Because you haven't been there yet. And so you're in that first cycle of change that you have to go through all these reiterations. So I think that we solve the problem by allowing first for creativity to be an option in terms of how we deliver programs. I think that panels like this where you are being educated, I would strongly suggest that if you don't know who your community action agency is that serves your respective areas, that maybe your staff schedule that meeting first thing, because I think you'll be very impressed with what they're doing in your respective areas. And I think that if they are a part of a brainstorming session with you as the leadership, then that brings a certain amount of credibility and a certain amount of focus to the particular meetings that are being had, that is not just another exercise in futility, but it's an exercise in making things happen the right way. And so therefore...
In my case, I don't have a problem because my 80-year-old parents are volunteers.
There you go.
So that's actually true. My dad's, he just turned 89, my mom's 83, and they were volunteers at the Sacred Heart Community Services.
There you go, yes.
San Jose.
And I would strongly encourage each of you. I mean, Senator Liu's office has been very good about asking us to partner with them on community outreach initiatives. It's given me a chance to get to know their staff. It's given her a chance to get to know our agency. And so when we walk into something like this, it's being proactive. You make friends before you need friends. And so we have done what we hope to. I mean, Mr. Orton attends our meetings from Senator Wright's office as a staff. Because we invited him when we talk about our community action plan, he attended to hear, well, what is that agency going to do in this area that we serve? So I strongly suggest that from where you sit, that we maybe schedule those meetings. Cal Neva, I'm sure, could help you in whatever way that you would need to identify who are the right players, because the people at those agencies know who the players are. They know who's doing great jobs. They know who needs support. Cal Neva is situated now to provide training and technical assistance to those of us who need help, and some of us do, myself included. I'm not beyond that, and so we want to get better at it. As for more bang for the buck to leverage the services, the second part of your question, I think that also lies in communities not being divided. I think that what we've tried to do in Long Beach is to show people, let's not fight over that slice of pie, let's bake a bigger pie. And let's see how that we can go about this in a way that we can all, by putting something on the table, take a lot more off the table for the greater good of the community.
Tough love.
Yes.
That's difficult.
Yes, it's very difficult.
Especially if you're considered the outsider,
Yes, it is. It is. But, you know, and my hair wasn't this gray 4 years ago, quite frankly. But the fact of the matter is, it is tough love. And it is something that...
I must, though. It's fine.
But I agree with you. I mean, it's a paradigm shift because as nonprofits, I come from banking and entertainment and in the YMCA. I've come from various backgrounds. I've written checks and I've asked for checks. So when I approach this from an entrepreneurial perspective. And I know that as nonprofits, some of us are nonprofits statewide, some of us are large public, medium-sized public, small public. We come in all various sizes to serve. But the key is we're all here to serve. And many of my colleagues have been doing this their entire career. I haven't had that honor, but we've been working hard at it. But I guarantee you, by working with panels like this on an individual level at the various cities and counties, that's where it starts. Because you kind of get people to come leaving egos and logos at the door. And we can put the real issues on the table and see how we can go about resolving those real issues. Because just like we're facing CSBG cuts, other nonprofits and for-profits, for that matter, are facing various economic impacts that hurt them just as much as CSBG reduction will hurt us. It will severely hurt us. But again, we're just trying to be entrepreneurial and how do we make it better.
Well, with that, any other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Liu. Well, if the goal here is to help individuals and families achieve self-sufficiency, and we believe that self-sufficiency is a job that is held for a sustained period of time, could you tell us what your experience is and your strategies in actually placing low-income people in jobs in this economy, and with various factors such as automation and other things affecting available jobs?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. I'm also a member of our local WIP, and I was chair of our local youth council in Long Beach for 8 years. I don't know that anyone served or wants to serve any longer than I just did. But the fact of the matter is, a self-sustainable wage in LA County is $12.51 an hour. So when you talk about the economy expanding and the service sector, because tourism is one of those sectors in Long Beach that they focused on, but the jobs are only minimum wage, you've basically just perpetuated the cycle of poverty if you're not paying at least $12.51, and that's for one individual. It's about $21 an hour for one individual with one infant. Now, there are not many of our youth, especially, let alone adults, who are making $21 an hour. So I think what can you do at this level is help our chambers of commerces and business sector understand that though it may be a burden to pay a higher wage, but if we're serious about addressing this issue, we have to be serious about how do we pay sustainable wages. But I think the other side of that coin is that we have to help people be trained in jobs that will actually earn them an income. And that's why our agency focused on digital media arts. So now we have teenagers that if any of you needed video edited, can edit video. If you need a video shot, they can shoot a video. If you need recording done, voiceovers, etc., they're learning engineering. We're in the entertainment capital of the world in Long Beach, in LA County. If I were living in a more rural area, maybe I would have 4-H clubs or other things that are pertinent to that particular region. So I think it's, in our WIB, I feel validated in that we took this pathway because our WIB just added another sector, and it was information services, specifically digital media arts. So locally, they've seen that as a trend. So I think that it's a matter of identifying those jobs that will pay a sustainable wage, because jobs that once were considered mainstream may not pay that, even if you had the best training program in the state. The fact is, when you graduate with a particular diploma or certificate, the job start-out salary is only going to be at a certain level. Conversely, there are jobs in digital media arts that might pay a lot more. That's our solution. I think the solution is unique to the situation, depending on where you respectively are living and finding out what might be those livable wage jobs. But I think certain jobs transcend geographic boundaries, such as digital media and technology, because you can work in one county and be serving a client across the nation or around the world. So I think we have to update people on that. Unfortunately, the lower income students don't have access oftentimes to the technology and the training that those types of jobs come from. And that's where a community action agency like us brings the world to them at that level, and income isn't a barrier to learning what they need to learn to do better for themselves and their families.
You work with the labor organizations locally as well?
Not directly, yes, sir. No.
Because I think that would be a benefit with
yes.
apprenticeships and things.
Yes. Well, we've just had one of our students signed with the help of the Recording Academy to a contract in music, and she is about to become a member of one of those organizations. But, we just help one life at a time.
Just also, as a follow-up question, how do you cooperate with the schools? In my experience, the schools tend to be the most isolated and the most important community agency to reach young people. And particularly as we look at career academies and career technical education, most of those come with some kind of a requirement or goal of paid internships for the young people, which is sometimes hard for small businesses to provide. And I just wondered if you had any things that you'd worked on to bring education to the table, number one, and to help with career education, which would fit, I think, perfectly into the program you're describing.
In terms of bringing education to the table, one of the ways that we leveraged CSBG dollars was to get a $600,000 contract with the Long Beach Unified School District to provide after-school programs at 5 school sites. All of our schools, with the exception of maybe one, is in a low-income area. 90813 is the most impoverished zip code in L.A. County, and that's one of our service areas. Believe it or not, it's in Long Beach. And so we at those schools are sort of restrained by the curriculum that the school district says that we have to do. 1 hour of academic enrichment, 1 hour of homework assistance, and 1 hour of health and leadership. And you have to follow a particular curriculum. So we're restrained in the sense that we can only do certain things, but where we got innovative was to hire our staff based on their talent. So if someone was talented in ceramics, they built a team around ceramics, and those were the hooks. So we kind of meet the kids where they are in terms of their interests, and then pull them into the program that way. And then we approach the whole academic piece. Well, if you really like ceramics and you make a lot of money at this, you got to know how to count your money, right? You got to know how to read your contract, right? And so we kind of reverse the script on them and let them see the relativity of the learning process after school, because what kid wants to sit after 8 to 3 or whatever it is in school,
5 hours, right.
and then go through another 3 rigid hours of academics. The other thing that we do in terms of bringing education to the table is to try to, in our teen program, again, we have one of the Commodores that teaches music. We have one of the best video directors in history teaching video production. We have content experts in photography and in graphics art. And it's those people who get a certain excitement for the kids. So I think in terms of your local communities, you don't have to have those people, but not everyone who has the wisdom is a teacher. So you have to identify those people who have a certain personality that the youth would be gravitating to, and then put those in places of leadership at the local level. Of course, I'm not an educator, so I'm not here to advocate for...
Yeah, but you're a smart guy.
Well, thank you, Sarah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll tell my board you said so.
Well, just actually, as an addition to that, I mean, talking about the weatherization programs, that California does now have a series of green technology career academies. I would hope there'd be at least one in the service area. And again, if there's ways to link the actual funding to do real projects with the theory and the practice.
I'll tell you exactly how we did that. We got a green, through the Governor's Green Jobs grant a couple of years ago in Long Beach. We're an urban community. We had a small lot that was just dust and rocks. Now if you drive by Long Beach Boulevard and Spring Street, it's one of the most lush gardens with 24 chickens and 10 ducks in the city of Long Beach. You get 24 eggs a day. Who did that? It was teens with pickaxes that dug irrigation ditches. They now know about green jobs. They now know about drought-tolerant landscaping so that we can show families how to change out their lawns and make it more California-friendly. As a result of that, the Salvation Army gave us 3/4 of an acre to make an even larger garden. If you're ever in Long Beach, I'd invite you to come by and see what is now considered one of the best examples of how teens have taken a blighted lot and turned it into something, and now our teens are being asked to come to homes in some cases and talk about, well, how do I take care of my avocado tree or my orange tree, or how do I change out this garden to be more drought tolerant? So we are doing that. We can only do it within the sphere of strength that we have. I'm trying to slowly expand. I dare not jump out there and say that I can put a solar panel on your house when that's not an area that we're trained in. However, we want to do that someday because we know that's something more that we should look into. But we are following what you suggest in our own way, and I'd be happy to give you more information on that.
Well, other questions, comments? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Simpson, and thank you again, Mr. Wagner and Mr. Reese, for attending today, and good luck with the state plan. Thank you. Thank you very much.